Welcome back to the podcast. Today's topic is going to be a juicy topic. It's going to be about, do fats and carbs make us fat?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are scared of fat. They're scared of carbs. There's lots of diets out there that advocate that you should completely cut these out of your diet. We're going to go in depth today. We're going to inform you on, should you eat carbs, should you eat fat, should you eat protein, what is good, what is bad, and kind of just give you all the information that you need to make the informed choice for yourself based on your own personal goals. So before we hop into today's podcast, we want to announce that we officially have our Subscribe and Save set up on our website. So we've been working on this Subscribe and Save for a little bit, getting it all set up. So it's officially all set up. You can head over to fitgrindformula.com. You can now officially save 15% when you subscribe. So we have 2 products currently out so far, working on a greens powder that will be releasing in the fall. But right now, you can subscribe and save 15% on our whey protein powder or our pink Starburst electrolyte. So if you're interested in checking those out or supporting the brand, go head over to fitgrindformula.com or also leave the link in the comments in the description below if you're watching or listening on YouTube. You know, it's using our whey protein powder as an extension of your diet to hit your daily protein goals. And that's something that we'll talk about later in the video, is maybe how much protein you should be eating and how can you structure that to get enough protein in throughout the day. And then using our electrolyte powder to fill in the cracks where if you're training hard and you're working hard, you are going to need to supplement with an electrolyte to make sure that you're properly hydrated, because water is not enough. The more water that we drink after a really hard, sweaty workout, we're actually just diluting our blood's electrolytes and our blood volume. So electrolytes are going to help hydrate you more than just plain water.
Yeah, the nice thing about that too is when you run out of your products, you automatically have them shipped right to you, or if you're local, you can pick them up. But you don't have to worry about that guessing game of, oh, when do I need to order more products? They just automatically get billed to you and shipped to you, and
you save 15%.
Yeah,
that's the worst
money.
when you go to get your scoop of protein, you open up the tub and you're like, oh man, this is my last scoop. I got to order it, and then it's got to get shipped, and it's a couple days before it gets to you. So subscribe, save 15%, and you'll just be able to have a constant supply of your products.
Yeah. So just to top off today's topic, I know this can be such a sensitive topic for a lot of people, because when we think of weight gain and overeating, we automatically think of overeating carbs, overeating fats, specifically one or the other for some people. But at the end of the day, it really just comes down to how many calories you're eating. And when we gain weight, we can't specifically say, oh, it's because I went over on my fats and it's because I've been eating more avocados. At the end of the day, it's not necessarily what the type of food you're eating is, it's how many calories you're eating by the end of the day.
Yeah. It's a simple equation. It's, calories in, calories out. Obviously, there needs to be certain ratios, and I think it all comes back to your goal. If your goal is to be as shredded as humanly possible, then yeah, your calories are probably pretty low. Therefore, your carbs and fat are probably pretty low, and your protein's pretty high.
Yeah.
Versus if your goal is to optimize performance, then you need to be structuring enough food in your diet to promote recovery, have good workouts, have good energy. So I think the first biggest question is you need to ask yourself, what is your goal? Are you looking to build muscle? Are you looking to lose body fat? Are you looking to train for performance? What's your timeline look like? All those questions that you need to ask yourself. But no matter what the diet is, not one of the macronutrients should be excluded. We don't want to exclude protein. We don't want to exclude carbs. We don't want to exclude fat. We kind of talk more about what each macronutrient plays its role in the body and why we want to structure enough of those in the diet. But the main thing is, like I said, we don't want to exclude either of those 3 macronutrients in our diet. There needs to be a good proportion of each.
Yeah, carbs and fats are going to be utilized for fuel sources, on top of fats also helping with our hormone regulation. And then a lot of times people think that all carbs are bad, but at the same time, if you're a high performing athlete, if you're a hybrid athlete, if you're incorporating lots of weight training and cardiovascular training in combination.
Yeah, carbs are going to be your body's preferred source of energy. So those are going to be broken down into glucose. That glucose eventually is going to be able to be stored in the muscle, and that's going to be a really easy fuel source for your body to break down during workouts. especially if you're strength training or if you're doing any sort of higher intensity training. That's a good fuel source for your body. So don't be afraid to eat carbohydrates. We'll go in depth in a second a little bit more about that. And then obviously protein too. Protein needs to be in the equation. You need to have adequate protein in your diet to help promote recovery. And those muscles that we're breaking down in the gym, they're only going to recover if we're eating enough protein. That protein is broken down, the amino acids are broken down, and that's what helps stimulate muscle protein synthesis to repair your muscle tissue. So making sure that we have carbs, fat, protein, typically around each meal and evenly throughout the day. Now, obviously, we're not going to have an even spread, and the ratios are going to look different for different people based on their goals, but we need all three of those. And I think, we're talking about carbs and fat today. Like, people are afraid of carbs and fat. And I think what we can talk about next is why we don't necessarily need to be afraid of carbs and fat, what happens when we eat carbs and fat, what matters more about total body fat gain, that type of stuff. So talk about carbs next and what happens when we eat carbs.
Yeah, well, like you said, they can be utilized and stored for energy sources later when we're using them to promote energy during our workouts. But there is such thing as good quality carbs and bad quality carbs, and I think that's not to be confused for people. So when people think of carbs, yes, a donut is going to be not as great choice of carbohydrates opposed to a sweet potato. Now, going into depth on this, the donut is going to have added fats, added oils, things like
Sugar,
that are going to make you feel like crap too. It's going to be more calorically, heavy, so it's going to have more calories in it. So then that sweet potato or baked potato is going to have less calories. It's going to be more filling. It's going to keep you satiated, and it's going to have those nutrients that your body needs to perform during your workout. There's a difference as far as quality of carbohydrates, and we'll get into fats too later, but just keep in mind that they're both going to be stored as energy and used as a good energy source. But if I'm going to eat a donut before a workout opposed to a sweet potato or a banana with some protein paired with both of those, my workout is going to be 20 times better eating that banana and protein shake or sweet potato versus that donut and protein shake, because it's just going to sit like a rock in my stomach and make me feel like crap. I've experienced it.
The carb source is also important. So yes, at the end of the day, if you have certain macros and you hit your protein, you hit your carbs, you hit your fat, but you ate all of your fat from processed foods and all of your carbs from processed foods, yes, your weight is going to stay the same if you're hitting your carbs, hitting your macros specifically. I've even made a YouTube video about this, about eating Oreos every day and still losing weight. You can still do it. One, it's going to take up a bunch of calories. So say you're trying to lose weight and you have structured carbs, fat, protein, your macros are structured, and you're in a caloric deficit, so you're already eating less food than your body burns. If you eat 3 to 4 Oreos every day and try and fit that into your diet, that's fine. You can still lose weight, but it's going to take up a big chunk of your calories. So realize that your healthier options, and specifically talking about carbs, things like potatoes, rice, oatmeal, fruit, whole grain breads, whole grain pasta, stuff like that, is going to fill you up a lot more. It's going to fuel your workouts a little bit better. You're typically going to have a little bit better energy and not feel as sluggish from those. So at the end of the day, by default, you're probably going to pick those carbohydrate sources more often than not, versus just picking cookies and donuts and cupcakes and processed food. Yes, that is still carbs, but also it all comes back to health too. We're all getting into the fitness lifestyle because we want to be healthy. We want to feel better. So that should be the number one goal. So we should eat to fuel our body, but we'd also need to eat to make sure that we are providing the correct nutrition for our body as well.
Yeah, and when we're in that deficit, that caloric deficit, choosing those foods such as Oreos, like you mentioned, those things aren't going to keep us full and satisfied and not give us the energy, which then is going to cause us to probably reach for more caffeine and just to try to get through the day. And all those sugars in those Oreos are going to make you crave those things more and 100%. More. I mean, that's something we've talked about recently too. you know, you could say, oh, I'm just going to have a little bite. I'm just going to have one bite of that Oreo. But naturally your body has that one bite and it wants more. It's like that dopamine kicks in and you're like, I need more. Like,
Yep.
And you can't stop thinking about that thing until you give it to your body.
It's like last night we were sitting on the couch and our youngest son, Cashton, he opened up this like package of those little donut hole things. And he's like, Dad, open it for me. And then he wanted me to hold on to it. And Alyssa was like, don't do it. Don't do it. I was like, I'm not going to do it because I knew if I eat one, I'm going to eat the whole package. So you're right. It's like crack. It's like, it's addictive. So the less processed food you eat, the less you're going to reach for it. That is 100% true.
Yeah, those companies know what they're doing. They're putting in these ingredients that are going to make you want more, buy more.
Just light up that dopamine response.
Yeah. And that's how they make their money. So keep that in mind and choose whole foods that are, again, going to keep you full and satiated longer. And something that can help with that is if you're eating like every 3 to 4 hours, so you don't go into this starvation mode where your blood sugar levels drop and you're like, I need food stat. That's when all those like cravings start to kick in too, for me especially. If I haven't eaten for hours and I've had a long busy day, barely drank any water, you know, sometimes that can happen because we get busy with life or we're running kids around, whatever it is. So being prepared for those times, like keeping, you know, a beef stick or a protein bar on hand to kick those cravings that kick in when we don't eat for long periods of time. That's a huge hack for me.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I want to touch on, and then we can move on to fat. I think carbs, especially right now, like people are really afraid of carbs. You have these really low carb diets out there that are advertised everywhere, even endorsed by people in the healthcare industry. And, you know, I think that it's very easy to say like, oh, eat less carbs and I'm going to lose weight. But we also need to ask like, what happens to our energy when that happens? And if we take a step back and we look at what happens when we actually ingest carbohydrates and we eat carbs, you can find a little more confidence in being able to structure more carbs in your diet. And like we talked about, try to eat more healthy, less processed carbohydrates in your diet. That's going to fuel your body a little bit better. You're going to hold on to less water and inflammation. And you're just, like I said, overall going to feel better. But those carbs are broken down. And like I said, if you're somebody that's working out consistently and you're constantly tapping into your muscle glycogen, so that's the carbohydrates that are stored within your muscle and in your liver, your body is going to be that much more used to storing those carbs that are broken down in the form of muscle glycogen. So don't think that, oh, I ate carbs, I instantly have to go work this off right now, or it's going to turn to body fat. And I think that's what a lot of people think is like, why do I need carbs if I'm not doing something right now? And yes, you want to structure carbs around your workouts. So like pre-workout, post-workout, it's where a bulk of your carbohydrates should come in because that's going to fuel your body. It's going to fuel your workouts. But you can also eat carbs at other times of the day and not gain body fat. What matters is the total end amount of carbs, fat, protein that you're eating at the end of the day. Ideally, like I said, structure those carbs around the workout. But there's nothing that is saying that if you eat carbs this moment and then you say for lunch and then you know you're going to be sitting for the next couple hours, that it's instantly going to turn to body fat. It's not going to happen, especially if your total net amount of carbs and calories and fat and protein is where it needs to be throughout the day. Don't think like that because I've been there too as well. I've been to those places before. And I'm here to tell you that you can eat carbs and it's not instantly going to be stored as body fat. Now, if we're constantly eating too many carbs and getting not enough movement or not enough exercise, or you're not really training that hard, then yeah, if you're eating more calories than you're burning, then you're going to store body fat. But at the end of the day, don't be afraid of carbohydrates because they are your body's preferred source of energy. And if you're going on these really low carb diets, or if you've ever been on a low carb diet, you can probably realize like your energy is not very good. You get a lot of brain fog. You might have really low libido, like all these types of things that can happen because you don't have enough energy. You don't have enough carbohydrates in your diet. So my main message here is don't be afraid of carbs. You can still structure good, healthy carb sources like we talked about in your diet, and you're going to have better performance. You're going to have better workouts. You're going to have better energy, and more than likely, probably overall, just be in a better mood throughout the day.
Yeah, there's a time and a place for your carbs. But with that being said, we don't want to obsess over that too much. Like I know a lot of people live by this rule, no carbs after dark. And I don't know where,
or no food.
yeah, I don't know where that came in. But if you're somebody that works out at night, your body needs those carbs at dark.
Yep.
Or if you're somebody who even works out early in the morning, like you want to fuel your body with carbs at night so that you have that energy for your morning workout. Because some people might work out fasted and you're fueling off of that evening meal. So keep that in mind, that wherever that came into play years ago, I don't know who came up with that idea, but the biggest thing is not to eat all of your carbs in one sitting. So we're not stashing those carbs and saving them all the way to the evening, or stashing them and saving them all the way so that we can eat a bunch of crap in one sitting.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, if you have an event coming up and you're going out with some friends and it's a once in a month deal or once in a year deal, you can pre-plan those things, but on a daily basis, we're not hoarding our carbs for one meal. If you know you're going to go out to dinner, you might, you know, sprinkle in your carbs here and there, but save majority of them for one meal. And maybe you do your workout around that meal or, you know, after that meal. But the idea is to spread them out throughout the day.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great point. So I think we got to talk about, we've hit on carbs. Let's talk about fat next. We've talked about, you know, regulates hormones. It's essential for our body. We can't exclude fat in our diet. It's just something that we should not do.
Yeah.
If you didn't eat fat in your diet, you wouldn't be able to live. You know, you wouldn't be able to maintain hormone regulation. It's essential for a lot of different functions in the body. Now, again, just like carbohydrates, there's good sources of fat and there's poor sources of fat, less optimal choices. I'm not going to say bad. I don't like to label things as black and white, but there are better choices. Things like avocados, nuts, seeds, nut butters, the fat that we get from some meats, from leaner cuts of meats, even things like fat from eggs.
Olive oils.
Yes, there's
oils.
lots of good fat sources that we should structure most of our fat around in our diet, because again, that's going to be less processed. It's going to fuel our body better. We're going to just naturally feel better and less sluggish. But again, just like carbs, just because you eat fat doesn't mean that you get fat. Yeah. Fat is a little more calorically dense. So as protein and carbs have 4 calories per gram, fat does have 9 calories per gram. So that's typically why we want lower to moderate fat in our diet, no matter what your goal is, because overall it's going to have less calories. But again, fat is not bad. Carbs are not bad. Protein's not bad. We've talked about this in previous podcasts and YouTube videos. You just want the right percentage of each depending on what your goal is.
Yeah, and these fats that we're eating throughout the day are going to take longer to digest. So they take up to 3 hours to digest. So they are going to keep us feeling full and satiated longer too. Some ways that I like to incorporate fats into my diet are, at each meal I try to incorporate a protein, a fat, and a fiber. Fiber typically comes from your carbohydrate source, sweet potato, fruits, veggies, oatmeals, things like that. So by balancing that out at each meal, you can add some fats to your oatmeal by, you know, topping that with a nut butter. And with your veggies, you can cook the veggies in olive oil. So there's easy ways to incorporate fats into your diet. And like you mentioned too, from meats, but overdoing the fat can be also very easy. Mm-hmm. So sometimes people think, oh, I'm eating beef. This is protein. Where yes, there's protein in beef, but what percentage of leanness are you eating? Are you eating an 85% beef, or are you eating a 93% beef? Because the more fat you have from that beef, the less protein you're going to get.
Yep.
So keep those things in mind on where you'd like to get your fats from. Me personally, I'd rather eat a lean cut meat and get fats from avocados, olive oils. I love peanut butter, so I want to incorporate those foods into my diet opposed to getting fat from meat. And you may be different, but That's me personally.
No, yeah, I think that's an area of that I see a lot of typically men struggle with, because the idea of protein, like we need more protein, and typically like men need to eat more protein because we weigh more, we have more muscle tissue. So I think a lot of guys think that just eat whatever meat I can get my hands on. The problem is, like we talked about, like let's take 85-15, 85% lean, 15% fat ground beef. Each serving is going to have, every 4 ounces is going to have 16 grams of fat, versus if you take away and you go up to 93 lean, 7 fat ground beef, you're going to have half the amount of fat. It's going to have 8 grams of fat.
Yeah.
And there's actually going to be a little more protein in that. So picking leaner cuts of meat can drastically lower the calories, and drastically lower the fat, by 50%. So don't just look at protein like, oh, I got my 200 grams of protein or whatever you're trying to eat a day. But you also have to look at, like, what does your fat content look like? Like I had a nutrition client, that he was hitting his protein, but he was also eating over 150 grams of fat a day, which is a truckload of extra calories that we don't need in our diet, no matter what your goal is, especially if you're looking to lose body fat. So just pay attention to the types of fat that you're eating. Make sure they're healthy fat sources, and you can pick what you like. We really like avocados a lot. We like nut butters, like peanut butter. We'll even do some Kerrygold Irish butter on sweet potatoes and toast and just stuff like that. We'll do eggs. So the yolk from eggs, we'll get fat sources there. We'll do some oils, cook some food in oil sometimes. So pick things that you typically like, but that's going to be a great way that you can get good quality fat sources in your diet, not adding things like cookies and donuts and highly processed, really, really fatty cuts of meat, that type of stuff. Those are not great fat sources. I would highly recommend not sticking to those, because you're going to feel the difference too. Like if you go eat a really, really fatty cut of meat, and it just has a bunch of fat, like you mentioned, fat takes a really long time to break down. So it's just going to sit in your gut like a rock, and it's just not going to feel that good. Versus if you're eating a good protein source, good lean protein source, a good solid carbohydrate source, you got a good fat source in there, and you got some veggies to balance it out, you get some more volume and some fiber. That's going to be a really good meal that you're going to feel really good after eating.
Yeah, I would start to, when you start like cutting carbs and fats, if you're going into a calorie deficit, I would find your non-negotiables. So for me, non-negotiables are going to be, I'm not getting rid of my butter or peanut butter in the morning. So instead of doing an egg yolk, I just drop to egg whites. Now, a lot of people don't like egg whites by themselves. You particularly would rather have a yolk in your egg. So some of that is like a non-negotiable. Like, okay, I know I love my eggs with the yolk. So where can I take some fats away? Or where can, if I'm going over fats, or if I'm going into a calorie deficit and I need to drop my fats. So find the non-negotiables. For me, like I said, I can drop that yolk and do all egg whites, so I can have my peanut butter or my butter that goes with my toast. And then, like I said, with my meats, I like my meat to be pretty dry and not fatty, whereas most people think the fat is where they get the flavor. So if that's a non-negotiable for you, then maybe you have to make some adjustments with, if you're doing an avocado with dinner and you have a higher fat meat cut, then you just have to do a little less avocado. Yeah. So there's ways to kind of like move and regulate everything when you are going through these calorie deficits or going on these caloric surpluses, or whatever you are, whichever phase you're in your diet. But keeping that in mind, that yes, we need to continue to get good quality fats in our diet, but you also need to be aware of where those fats are coming from.
Yeah. Fitness is just like life. It's all about trade-offs. Like if you want some big juicy legs, you're gonna have to train hard, and it's gonna hurt. If you want to lose weight, you're going to have to eat less calories than you burn and be in a caloric deficit. And there's that trade-off there.
Sacrifice.
You want to be able to run a 4-minute mile, like you're gonna have to go through some hard times to get there. Like it's all about trade-offs and sacrifice, and you give a little, you take a little, but at the end of the day, it all comes back to your goal. What are your current goals? What are you trying to achieve? Is there a timeline with that goal? And just realizing that you need to take care of the big picture items first. Things like, are you consistently working out? or trying to progress in the gym from week to week, because that's something huge that if you're not, that's something very simple that we can create some structure that is going to help take care of a lot of other things. Nutrition-wise, are you structuring your food around whole food sources, or are you just eating processed food? Are you drinking enough water throughout the day? Are you using electrolytes? Are you getting enough sleep at night? Like really simple things that if you just take care of those, then we can really get into like really specific things. But I think a lot of people, just like if you're learning math the first time, and instead of learning how to add and subtract, they want to go right to calculus. And it's like, that's not how it works. That's not the natural progression. We need to focus on the big picture items first, like whole food, workouts, sleep, hydration.
Protein,
yes, getting
water.
enough protein in your diet. Like those are big things to focus on first. And we need to stop really thinking about like, oh, this carb source is better than this carb source, or this timing for this one macronutrient is better here. Like, yes, we can eventually get to those things, but master the basics first, and you're going to see some progress and build up some momentum, and then we can build on top of that. But try not to, like I said, try not to go right to doing calculus. Learn how to add and subtract first.
Yeah. And that all depends on your goals too. If you're going into a bikini prep, obviously you got to be strict and you got to go from one extreme to the other, but I wouldn't recommend that right away. I would recommend going to a lifestyle, getting comfortable with that, and then diving into a deeper cut. But I think, the last thing I want to touch on too is, some people digest fats better and some people digest carbs better. So a lot of the times I particularly will tell my clients like, non-negotiable is your protein. This is where I want you to be at your protein. It's that 0.8 to 1 gram per body weight. That doesn't change. And here's the calories I want you to be at. Now, let's start with, 40% to 50% in the carbs. And then that 20 to 25% is going to be from your fats. And, I have them start tracking. And then if they're like, I'm really struggling to keep the fats down and struggling to reach my carbs, maybe they just like fattier food, and that's okay. As long as they're hitting their protein, staying within that calorie range that I'm giving them, then it's okay to kind of go back and forth on carbs and fats. I'm okay with that. As long as you're not going way over your fats and staying super low on your carbs. There's got to be, some sort of balance there. But some people just digest fats a little bit better than others. Me particularly, I can barely digest anything over 16 grams of fat in one meal. My body it doesn't like that. It makes my stomach hurt. It makes me feel like crap. So my body particularly likes carbs better. And that's something you'll learn over the process of getting into counting macros and getting into your fitness journey. Is you'll see where you fall. Maybe you fall closer to eating more fattier foods and less carbohydrates. But when I say less, we're still keeping that on the high range. I don't want you guys to think that I'm saying skimp on carbs and stay keto. But
the main thing is like just figure out what works for you. And like, that's why we post content, because we're here to help and kind of guide you in the right direction. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of different factors that are going to affect your personal preferences, what's most optimal for you. So you just take some trial and error, and that's, like I said, that's why we do what we do, to provide structure for people that we train here in person, people that we train online, the nutrition coaching that we provide. Like that's our whole goal, is to help people kind of streamline that process, create some structure, and help them, guide them to what is going to work best for them. So we hope this podcast was helpful, guys. If you have any questions, we'd love to help out any way that we can. Just let us know in the comment section below, and we'll definitely get back to you. Like I said, we are trainers day by day, gym owners, and we love to help people. So we love to help out any way that we can. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and we will see you guys in the next episode.